My father was a professor of folklore at the University of Lund in the south of Sweden. My father's subject was folklore, Swedish, Scandinavian folklore, but his particular hobby was Irish folklore. I remember in my childhood we almost all the time had some Irish student living in our house who studied for my father in Lund.
Were you the only child?
I was my mother's only child. My father was married once before and had a son with his first wife. But I was an only child, and my childhood was very quiet. My father was a very quiet man. He read and studied always, didn't say very much. He was 50 years when I was born, so he was in a way 2 generations ahead of me, and belonged to the 19th century. My mother was 37 when I was born, so she wasn't that young either, and she was a teacher, school teacher, before she married, and my home was very bourgeois, I would say. In Lund, where I grew up, there was no theatre, and theatre did not belong to the world of my parents, so I didn't know anything about theatre, consequently. They were not interested in films either. They didn't go to the movies, and which meant that I didn't really go very much when I was little either. Not until my friends inspired me to do that. Then in 1943, the municipal theatre of Malmö opened. And Malmö is a town about 20 kilometers from Lund. And the theatre was very modern, very elegant in those days, had a huge, large stage and a smaller one. And that was my first contact with theatre, when my school took the students there. And that was a fantastic experience to me. Very soon, a group of my friends and I started an amateur group in college. No, in high school. I was a very shy young man and had certain difficulties to get to know people, to take contact with people I didn't know. But this was suddenly became an opportunity for me to express myself in a way that one just didn't do in my home. You didn't really burst out into emotional outbursts. You just stated things or asked for things or answered questions. But the theatre became a new world which fascinated me, and very soon I decided that I wanted to try to become an actor. Then there were certain coincidences that helped me in a way, because I graduated in high school, then I had to do my military service, which took about a year, and then I planned to apply to the acting academy at the Royal Dramatic Theatre, which in those days belonged to Dramaten. And because that was the place to go. And by that time, Dramaten had got a new president who came from Lund. He was one of the professors, a colleague of my father's. And I applied and I was accepted. The fact that I was accepted and the fact that he was the president of the theatre was, or functioned, I think, as some kind of a guarantee for my parents that it was, yes, respectable, and also I was very young, so they probably thought that if I made it, it was okay. If I didn't, there was time to do something else or try something else. As a student at Dramaten, you were guaranteed 2 years. If Dramaten saw possibilities in hiring you, if they saw this is a young person they would like to later on hire as an actor or actress, they could force you to stay a 3rd year as a student. And then after that, if they wanted, they would hire you. But during that time, when I remember that when Ingmar Bergman was preparing or shooting Prison, Fängelse. A rumor circulated at Dramatens elevskola that he needed extras for some policemen or some police officers, and I remember I called him and asked if maybe I could be one of them, and he said no. I met him in Norrköping later on. He was there directing Rose to Two. What I remember from that time was that he approached me in Malmö. I don't know what we were up to, but he told me that he was going to make a film based on his wood painting, the play. And he had some ideas. He had, as I now recall it, he had some kind of a revelation listening to Karl Orff's Carmina Burana, and felt that he had seen, say, images. He also had some idea that he wanted to develop the actor or the juggler who was in the play. I don't remember the details from the play. I saw it produced the year before I was employed in Malmö, but I don't remember that. But he had some idea. He asked me if I had seen Picasso's painting of a circus family, a clown and his wife and child. You know yes. This blue, beautiful portrait. And he said, I'm going to change a little the concept of the actors here, and I would like to use this as some kind of a model, and would you like to play this clown? And I said, yes, of course. And then he came back to me after some time and said, I've changed my mind. Would you like to play the knight? And I said, yes, but he doesn't talk, does he? Well, yes, he will. In the film, I think he has to talk. He makes you believe that what you do is important. So we all knew that this was something very special, and that he had finally been allowed to do something he had wanted to do for a long time, but which the producers had said, no, that won't be any form of success. We can't put up any money for this kind of artistic endeavors. And but of course we had no idea that it would become as important as it later on has become. We also did it for very little money. I don't remember what I was paid, but it was... Yes. But nevertheless, to me, in that situation, a good salary. If I watch my old films, like also Ingmar's earlier films that I was in, I hate a lot of what I'm doing. But this is, I mean, the films from the 50s. Yeah. I do a lot of stage acting there. I don't know how much it is obvious for somebody who doesn't totally understand Swedish, but I have always been disturbed by the way I speak, say in the Seventh Sea. Mm-hmm. It's very much like this all the day.
It's rhetorical.
Yeah, very, yes. And I think it's awful. Yeah. I really do. Then after that time, television came. Yeah. And suddenly we were all accustomed to a lot of realism from newsreels and all that, and from talk shows and whatever. And also, I'm sure that the American method acting did a lot. But today, film actors, also with a theatre background, and also theatre actors on stage, I think, use, at least in Sweden, use a different style than the one we had, say, in the 40s and 50s, on stage and on film. But now Ingmar's dialogue in those days was very stylized. It was very stylized. So it maybe, it's difficult for me to say today. It would have been difficult to say those lines totally realistically. Maybe. But the way I say them, I do not agree with today. Had I said them today, I certainly would have tried to say them differently. But of course, that film, being the first one I was in that Ingmar made, is one of the most important films for me, or has become, because one, it was the first one in a number of 11 films with Ingmar. It was because of Ingmar's films that I later on was offered films from abroad, and because of that I'm here today. So I mean, that film changed my life, of course. Ingmar changed my life. Now you have to remember that Bergman to me is history. I haven't worked with him for a long time, so I don't know how he is today. And this is something this is a question, of course, I've been asked so many times.
Yes.
But as I recall working with Ingmar, and this goes both for films and theatre, is that he never really gives you a lecture on what he wants to do. If he does, it's just a few words. Then when he starts rehearsing or gives you the blocking on the stage or blocks the scene in front of the camera, he just tells you, say, the rhythm of the scene, and from that you understand what he wants you to do with the part somehow. And then you do what you believe is the right. If he doesn't like it, he changes it one way or the other. If he's happy, he doesn't say anything. Or this was the way it was anyway. Ingmar always had a wonderful ability to make people enthusiastic and work together towards a mutual goal, and feel that we involved with this, we are a group and we do this together, and he is the one who inspires all the rest one way or the other. And he did that immediately. He manages to make everybody think that it's great fun to do whatever it is, even if it is very serious. And he, as so many people, they're not aware of the fact that he can be very funny, and that there's a lot of laughing and jokes going on the stage or behind the camera in between takes. I had several offers from Hollywood. Did you ever meet Paul Corner?
Yes.
I met Paul in Cannes, 1960, when I was there with Jungfrukälla. And he asked me this thing. He was very, very charming, and I said no. But he then came back. On his way after Cannes, he went to Sweden and met Ingmar, I think, and called me, and we had a day together. And he again approached me and said, "I would like to be your agent." And I said, "Right, no, why should I? I'm going to work in Sweden, and I don't need an agent." And he said, "Well, okay, if I can get an offer for you somewhere in Hollywood that you would accept, would you then agree to sign with me?" I said, "Okay." And then came Stephen's offer, and I turned him down. And but he came back to me and I again said no. Finally, he said, "Why don't you come over here and see what we are doing?" And I agreed to do that. And that was 61, I think, in February. And I spent a week in Hollywood and met Stevens and saw what he was doing. And Carl Sandburg was involved in the screenplay. and they showed me all kinds of research they had done for the costumes and scenography, and they didn't have a screenplay, but they had kind of sketches for certain scenes which Sandberg had written, and they fascinated me. And I was impressed, and I was seduced by, say, the niceness of Hollywood in those days. And of course he did all he could to seduce me, I'm sure. And finally I said, okay. And then I was very suspicious. But then everything was new to me. Say, the country, the people, the language, the attitudes. And we had then 2 little boys, and both my wife and I were fascinated by, say, the pleasant life of California, Southern California in those days. The actor's profession in Sweden was in those days not considered particularly. No, but being an actor or being a star in a film in Hollywood was certainly something very important. So there was a difference, which I hadn't experienced before. Then, again, I slowly realized that being an actor in Sweden, you were allowed to be involved in some kind of artistic project which somehow was allowed to not to succeed if you were, say, artistically ambitious enough. In Hollywood, if you do not succeed, you are nobody. When we went there first, we did it with the idea that I would still go back and work in Sweden. I didn't decide to stay, but I thought or hoped that there would be, that the one part would lead to another. But I realized, of course, very soon that there weren't that many parts for me, being a foreigner. And that's a truth you have to face if you do not speak the language totally fluently, which I never did. What I have to do, being in English-speaking films, is I can only choose between the foreigners in the films. And that is a bit problematic because the foreigners are not always that much fun to do.
Evil.
They are very often evil, yes. It was and is complicated, but particularly in the beginning. Because when I came to the United States, the producers, the directors didn't know me at all. If they knew anything, they had seen one or a few Bergman films. And what had they seen? They had seen me in The Seventh Seal, The Magician, Virgin Spring, maybe something else. But all these things...
All costume dramas.
Yes, costume dramas, and with some kind of religious angle on it. And the films, as films, were very serious, more or less. So I was probably immediately typecast as a Bergman actor, and certainly a Scandinavian, and probably for somebody who hasn't been to Scandinavia, I probably looked like a typical Scandinavian. I was tall and blonde and fair-skinned and blue-eyed, and then again, my name had a German ring to it. So what can we use this actor for? We can use him for foreign parts. We can use him for Nazi officers in films about the Second World War. We can use him in religious parts. And I'm sure they believed I was. Certainly after the great story was told, they were probably convinced that I also was terribly religious as a person. But all that I had to fight.